Hello, CREtech. My name is Daniel Ramirez. I am the Director of Innovation for Skanska's Commercial Development Unit. I'm excited to be here as part of the Reimagining Real Estate virtual conference and excited to share a little bit about our process with regards to digitization within our industry. So just starting here with a little bit about Skanska. Skanska is a international development and construction company, very large, based in Sweden. We have business units, as I mentioned, in Sweden, as well as the Nordics, Europe, and the United States. Within the States, we have a construction unit, USA Buildings, a civil unit, USA Civil, as well as Commercial Development US, which is the business unit that I work for. Within Commercial Development US, we operate in 5 markets: Boston, Washington, DC, Houston, Seattle, and Los Angeles. We have a corporate presence in New York as well. We're actively developing in each of those markets. So as part of my role, I work with each of those teams to help implement our innovation program with regards to product and process. My background is in research and development within the AEC industry, as well as product development within the AEC industry. So it's been an interesting transition to real estate. I joined the team about 2 years ago. And really upon arrival was very immersed in starting to develop our process with regards to innovation as well as digitization. This slide here represents our development process, which I think is important to point out. We are not long-term holders of real estate. We, as part of the overall Skanska ecosystem, develop real estate, reach critical leasing threshold, stabilize the asset, and then divest the asset and return that capital back to the business. With regards to digitization specifically, that has been a unique challenge. Like everyone else in the world, at around March of this year, we were put in a position where we had to drastically rethink our approach to working. I think we had tremendous benefits from the work that we had kind of put in place. And really we're put in the position where we had to both accelerate existing efforts and take the existing processes and tools that we had developed and start to define a new way of working. What we have found was that the kind of virtual process was a bit of a hindrance for our teams, at least initially. And that's really based off of the nature of, I would argue, real estate development in general. It's a very hands-on business, very tangible, high touch, high feel, based off of the nature of both construction and how we work as teams. I think anyone within the Skanska CD team would tell you that we have fantastic teams in each of our regions. But when put in a virtual environment, it required some retooling and rethinking to really make it successful. So as I mentioned in March, our team really focused on how to redefine that for all of our regional offices and come up with a process that allowed us to continue to innovate and really allow the best ideas to percolate to the surface. And it also allowed us to be very agile and work very quickly. So I'll share some of that with you now. So there are 4 tenets of this process that we've developed. The first is canvas, the second is digest and analyze, the third is democratize and focus, and the last is solve, structure, and share. During each of these steps that we've laid out here, we were playing with both the cadence of communication and the types of communication that we were implementing with our teams. I think we realized there's a bit of virtual meeting burnout that's happening at the moment. We are very aware of that and wanted to create opportunities for different levels of engagement, both through the size of the groups that were participating as well as the means of participation. So the first step here, Canvas, really required working with our teams and workshopping across all of our regional markets in a very similar fashion to the way that I had been working with our teams in the past. I would typically meet with our regional teams once a quarter, which required a fair amount of travel, and really get into a hands-on workshopping process to help both collect the general demeanor of the teams at that particular moment, which was very much driven by the stage of the projects that they were working on, as well as start to collect the best ideas, problems that they were starting to be involved with in their offices. And then through a series of kind of workshopping exercise, collect that information, and then synthesize that actually into some results that the team could actually see very quickly, which required a kind of rapid deployment of that information for the team. So using traditional kind of innovation workshopping tools, we were able to do that pretty successfully. And frankly, using off-the-shelf software, right? You know, what you're seeing on the right here is really a basic tool called Microsoft Whiteboard, which is essentially just recreating that kind of ubiquitous posted environment that we're all probably used to, but it allows that to happen in a virtual environment. So, you know, this was really successful in getting the teams to start thinking about ideas, keep that process going of idea collection, so that we can continue to really ideate very quickly and come up with different means, methods of handling the very nuanced problems that we were now facing. You know, and then upon, you know, collecting that information, I think a big change for us has been around data collection and data analytics as well. As a large IT customer of Microsoft and all of the tools within their suite, we were really able to leverage that relationship to bring in the kind of best in class from that Microsoft suite of tools. One of those tools is a program called Power BI, which we started to really leverage for our business. So on the right-hand side here, you'll see a number of tools that we've actually developed using that platform to help us analyze not just the traditional real estate metrics of our business, but also take all of that high touch, maybe anecdotal information that was being created through these workshops and bring it into a form where we could actually start to look at potential trends that could percolate in the business, right? And I think that's interesting for us because in the past it had been very much, like I said, purely anecdotal, very high touch, high feel. We were suddenly taking that information and creating an actual data analytics backbone. Upon doing that analytics work, we were able to start to create more specific piloting programs, right? That allowed us to engage with teams directly and set up, again, more deep focused workshopping exercises. So on the right here is representative of a workshop that was actually set up with our Seattle unit based off of understanding the wants, needs of their region, as well as overall business. This was really focused on methods of using data to drive design decisions, which is something that I think really rose to the top of potential products that we can be working on as we did this early work. So you're looking here at, again, a screen cap of that workshop. So in the democratize and focus stage, looking at curating content to share and then targeting that follow-up facilitation with our teams. And really there's when we started to implement specific pilots to help benefit those small minimum viable product offerings that we were working with the teams on, and really put in place a kind of product development process to track the success of those pilots to see how they might potentially be scaled for the rest of the organization. So at that stage, we're really entering the last phase of this process here, which is the solve, structure, and share phase, where, again, we've set up these targeted solutions. We've checked and measured the success of those pilots, and we are then able to fold that into a national strategy to really benefit the entirety of the business. And then, frankly, we are then able to share that information with the entirety of the business, as well as democratize the results and really allow us to put our energy in the right places. So this was really critical for us, this last piece here, because I think in the past we had implemented a number of pilots and did not have the wherewithal to scale them into more of a national strategy. And I would say, through this system that we've put in place, we've been able to do that successfully on a number of fronts. What we'll be talking about next is really the results of that process with regards to how we started to implement solutions for our business, and really looking at the productization of our business, right? Not having kind of bespoke solutions, but really creating enterprise scale solutions that could help our teams really work very quickly and solve problems in real time. So as I mentioned before, our process was really focused on a quick return of capital. And this slide here is indicative of how my job as kind of our national innovation champion was challenged by that process. So with regards to my ability to make an impact on a project, that ability to make an impact is exponentially higher at the earlier phases of a project, and that's just due to the practical implications of capital deployment and the return metrics being established for the pro forma and returns on a real estate project. As anyone in the industry is aware, those capital decisions are made early. The further you get into construction and potential lease up, the fewer opportunities there are to make a bold move. Inversely, the value of those decisions was not able to be validated until the end stages of a project. So really upon operations and when the building is occupied is the point at which we can actually validate the work that we have done. So it created this kind of inverse relationship where we needed to figure out a means and methods of capturing the information that the information on the work that we had done earlier on previous projects and return that to the strategy of how we approach new development projects. So we started to reconfigure how that works and started to think more cyclically with regards to how we are approaching real estate and development. The following slides represent some of the work that we've done to date based off of that new method. First and foremost, I mentioned this earlier, we have invested a lot of time, energy in data analytics and data analytics platforms for the business. What we realize is that there's a number of great tools out there that can, and companies out there that can create really great products that can provide you with kind of out-of-the-box analytics that are really powerful. But for our business specifically, we wanted to have more control. So really looking business-wide and looking at the profile of our company, we realized we are a small, nimble business unit that is part of a larger company so we essentially have a bit of the best of both worlds where we can be very agile and fast and build, but we have the backbone of a large IT organization that supports all of US to really work with best-in-class enterprise solutions as opposed to less established technology. So again, through our kind of larger IT infrastructure, we were able to leverage our relationships to use enterprise scale solutions like Power BI, also procure data for the organization and start using that to create very specific insights a la carte for our teams to implement and use. So what you're seeing in the slide here is representative of one example of that. We've essentially built our own internal project database where we look at the entire history of past projects, current projects, and potentially planned future projects, and really just created a very simple tool for our teams to speak to one another and find information on their projects at a national level. Through the work that I've done with the CD team, as well as some of my team members as part of our strategic services team, we tended to be put in the position of telephone operator, where we were essentially making very bespoke connections with teams to help leverage that knowledge sharing that was critical to the success of our company. The tools that we're developing here represented in this slide really allow our teams to do a bit of that on their own and really allow for a more organic exchange of ideas as opposed to, being very siloed within their regions, right? Our teams are very good at being deep within their regional expertise. We wanted to allow everyone else nationally to benefit from that deep expertise and share ideas across the business. Because what we've often found is that we're all encountering very similar problems, have had different experiences that are really beneficial when you start to consider different ways of solving problems. So this tool really allows teams a very quick means and methods of doing that. Next slide here represents our approach to tenant experience in our buildings. We've developed this concept of building UX. We've invested, I would say, a tremendous amount of capital, manpower, and time in really considering the customer journey in our buildings, both from a physical space perspective, as well as from the digital experience perspective. So what that means is an investment in the ubiquitous means and methods of interfacing with the world, or apps for our tenants to use in the building, which really tie together a number of services. Considerations for the ground plane of our buildings, overall performance metrics for our buildings, and bring that into one experience for tenants to really take advantage of these platforms that exist. I think this has been a really interesting process for us, because we had really started working on this problem and this strategy from a very customer focused perspective to allow for high levels of transparency, frictionless entry in our spaces, as well as exchange of information from tenants to property management to tenants. What we have found is that in this kind of post-COVID or mid-COVID world, these are the exact things that are critical for tenants to reoccupy space. So we were very well prepared for having to make the necessary changes to allow for safe occupancy of our buildings. And that was all through that early investment in technology and really acknowledging the customer experience and the ability for technology to help augment and improve the overall physical experience in a space. We've also invested a tremendous amount in reality capture. I think this is something that is probably pretty common within real estate at this point, but for us, it was interesting having a building partner in-house who was using this information for overall construction productivity purposes. That all of that information, when applied to real estate, actually created unlocked some new assets and unlocked some new value for us. So whereas on the building side, the focus is really on construction productivity, that reality capture information can also benefit the real estate side when you consider virtual touring of space, enhanced turnover of an asset to a new owner, rather than giving them a pile of PDFs or stack of paper representing the kind of building manual. We can now hand over these data-rich assets that allow for navigation of our buildings and an understanding of where things are, and really unlocking new value, both from the ability to attract tenants in a virtual environment, which is we're all struggling with at the moment and trying to figure out. We now have those assets, and then in the potential disposition of a building, we now have another asset to add to the offering with regards to kind of a digital twin blueprint of the space. That project dashboarding has become critical for us as well. So understanding construction construction metrics, understanding our markets in more detail. We are now able to, with each regional team, based off of both kind of the data sets that we're able to acquire, as well as their regional expertise, commingle those results and create very targeted market intelligence tools for those teams to use. And standing up these tools, I think even 6 months ago would have been a very, I would say, difficult process for us. We're now able to turn this around in a matter of weeks and give them something to use out of the box that really allows them to work quickly, make decisions faster, as well as create the necessary documentation that they need to sell these projects. So really creating a shorthand, very more expedited way of both understanding their market, creating the content to help others understand their markets, and make those key decisions that unlock capital, potential tenancy, as well as divestment. And the last thing here, with regards to data-driven design, is something that I think has become increasingly important for how we look at development. So I would say a number of months back, really looking at the way that we both acquire design and make decisions around design. Having come from the AEC world, understanding their limitations with the exchange and number of iterations that we can look at, and really started to look at the software out there and the companies working in this space that could help us do this faster. So through a number of these data-driven design platforms, we're starting to think more critically around, can we generate more than one or two potential options for a space, and look at potential hundreds of different scenarios where we're taking into account all of the things that are important to us, both environmental, as well as quality of public space, in addition to the traditional pro forma information, and really start to look at additional options. And when you look at the prospect of a real estate development project, the amount of capital you are putting at risk to generate one of these buildings is very high. So by leveraging technology, giving our teams more options, and frankly, if you're able to look at options that you were not capable of producing with traditional methods, really de-risking some of the investment to make it a more data-driven decision and less of a hunch, which is, oftentimes you're penciling projects with data that you're collecting, but there are still some guesswork with regards to how it will perform in the future. So you're really leveraging data to help us unlock different scenarios that we weren't able to produce in the past. So that all being said, I think that linear process that we developed earlier, or showed earlier, that showed our development process, has now become more of an iterative circular process where we're looking at all of our projects within this cycle, and then looking at the parts and pieces that we can leverage during each of the phases to help us improve, and then not just improve at that particular phase, but then actually look at what we learned from each of those implementations, and then return those ideas and knowledge sharing back to other projects, right? So moving to a more circular process and able to kind of plug in both at the data platform and technology levels to really allow our teams to implement the best tools that we have available, as well as learn and improve from project to project. So this has, I think, been really fundamental, a fundamental shift for us, and it started to bear fruit and has really put us in a position to succeed here in this new world. So that being said, that's all I have to share. I'd like to thank the CREtech team for inviting me to be part of this conference, and I hope to both participate, learn more, and hear from anyone with any specific questions you might have. Thanks.